who I am. I struggled for a long time with this information about myself. But like all issues of truth and self-awareness, there comes a time when individuals can no longer keep the truth of who we are a secret. I got to a point where I could no longer hide who I was just to keep other people liking me. The need to become fully integrated, to live a life of authenticity, where my public life, what people saw about me, matched my insides. It became a driving force, and I could no longer pretend it didn't matter. It does matter. All thinking humans go through a process of self-examination, and in particular, all UUs I've ever known, because we're thinking, questioning people, have go through this process. Whatever your sexual orientation, gender identity, any other types of ways that make us different from the larger culture. I am so grateful for this faith that not only allows, but encourages, practically requires, everyone to stand in the truth of who they are and live it out loud. I came to this faith in 2005 after being part of another faith for about 9 years. This other faith, which I will not name, was supportive of GLBTQ folks like myself, and they were very happy to do same-sex wedding ceremonies. They had no issues with it. I felt quite happy there for many years. They were good to stay within their own walls, and they never ever took a stand in the communities where they were located or on the national level. They in no way declared themselves supportive of GLBTQ people. I finally noticed this. It took me a few years because I was just wanted to be in a safe place. That was my low bar right there. The final straw, after I started paying attention to this, was when the church I was attending chose not to participate in an annual event in the community that supports another local organization that serves people who are affected by HIV/AIDS. The staff there didn't know anything about this event, and this was a really big event. You couldn't possibly not know what was happening. They didn't know about the event, and they didn't understand why it was important to me that we get involved. When I heard these responses, I decided it was time for me to leave this safe, accepting place. I had to move on to find another place where I could go and they would be public, be willing to take a stand with me. It is not enough to just be nice to my face. You have to be willing to be in public. I decided to try the local UU church because it hit me that people who are willing to be nice to me, sometimes I get nervous around people who are just nice to me. These people, you wonder, what are they really about? But they weren't willing to also get mud thrown on them when things got ugly. They were not really my ally. I knew I had to draw a line. It was no longer good enough for folks to tell me they were all for me as a person if they weren't willing to take a stand. It just wasn't okay anymore. Sometimes you finally get to a point where you say enough. My own self-awareness, my own liberation now required that I had to be in a faith community that was doing its work on this important issue. So in 2005, I began attending my home church in Greensboro, North Carolina. The minister at the time was a gay man, and they too were recognized as a welcoming congregation. But even there, when the rubber met the road in 2012, an anti-gay marriage constitutional amendment was on the ballot, and things started getting tense. There were many times I felt like I was shouting in the wind, begging people to say what was happening, to notice, to pay attention. You see, I had lived through this vote when I lived in Missouri. There is nothing like waking up the day after your rights have been voted on by thousands and thousands of strangers. All of these invisible people going into voting booths and determining whether queer people like me, whether I should have the right to get married. When I lived in Missouri and this vote happened, there were a lot fewer allies. So I woke up the next morning feeling like I had been sucker punched by millions of strangers and many people I knew as my co-workers. I knew how they had voted. It was absolutely horrifying. So when I moved to North Carolina and they didn't have this anti-gay marriage amendment in their state constitution, I was thrilled and very impressed with the work of Equality North Carolina. This was the only state in the South at the time that didn't have this. Turns out that joy was short-lived because the state legislature put it to a vote. In their infinite wisdom, they thought that the people should vote on basic human rights. That is never a good idea. As the election day drew near, it was in the primary election in the spring, I watched in horror as many folks in my home church that I love could not understand why I was in a state of near hysteria almost all the time. I kept getting the message to calm down. It was going to be okay. I worked really hard to create opportunities for people to get involved, but very few people took this seriously, and I just could not understand why. This happened in a year where I was not on the board. I had served 3 years as a trustee. I came off for a year, and then I came back in a different position. So this was my in-between year, and I was feeling kind of out of sorts. I was unaware that the board president had received an anonymous letter from someone in the congregation telling them that the board should not take a side, that all sides should be heard. Yes, I'm still angry about this. The board president at the time was a typical white, straight, cisgender man who had been taught the importance of remaining calm and always being professional. So he didn't share in my passion. He just couldn't get excited. And he could not get other people also working for this. When I learned about this letter, I was furious that an anonymous letter could be contributing to the congregation being silent on this issue. I went to the board with an ad that several of us worked on, and we asked them to approve this ad being placed in the local newspaper. There was pushback about whether it mattered so late in the game. Why get involved now? But I was determined that my church, because I'm very territorial about some things. I was there for 10 years. This is my church. I was determined we were going to live their values, period. The board approved the ad, and a congregant paid for running it herself. It was a small comfort, but it was finally done. The Sunday before this election, I got the music director, and we agreed that we were going to sing this song that was written by a local songwriter against the vote. The congregant sang it, he was excited about it, but the congregation sang it without enthusiasm, and I was nervous. Why aren't they excited? I felt like they were going through the emotions to appease me, which is never a good thing. In my heart, I always wondered who was that anonymous letter writer that was keeping the congregation from moving into a proactive stance on this issue. I did eventually find out who this person was, and I was shocked. It was someone who, like my previous faith, gave me lip service about being supportive. This person always seemed happy to see me and my wife, Michelle. He made sure that we were invited to his house for a gathering. He once said that he wanted to get to know us, but still somehow felt that equal airtime should be given to the other side. There is no other side on discrimination. This person was only part of that church for a short time, but they had an amazing outside impact, as you could tell, because I'm still hurt and angry about this in 2019. Friends, as the UUA president, Susan Frederick Gray, recently said, this is no time for a casual faith. In 2012, that was no time for a casual faith, especially during that vote. And now in 2019, there is still a need to take public stands. It's funny that even though I felt like I had to drag my church kicking and screaming into getting involved, I never stopped being a Unitarian Universalist. I never said it was the larger, these principles are wrong, this theology is wrong. It's that people weren't willing to live their faith. I believe in this, otherwise why in the world would I have gone to seminary? I still believe in the dream. The basic theology of Unitarian Universalism comes from two main points. Both of these words are part of they're from former traditions who actually labeled and said, wait a minute, you're not like us anymore. These groups said, we can no longer be the same as the larger culture. We have to stand in who we are. The Unitarians came out of the Trinitarian traditions. They believed then, and we believe now, in the oneness of God, not the Trinity. Universalism is also a reaction to others. It is the belief that all people are loved by God, and they did not take that lightly. They really, every single person. The early Universalists saw the hellfire and damnation preachers having revivals and telling people they were going to hell, and they decided that that no longer fit who they were. They just could not believe in that kind of God anymore. They decided that God had to love everyone, no exceptions. That we were all loved and everyone goes to heaven. Both of these groups had to wrestle with, who am I in this larger culture that wants me to conform? And how will I stand in my own truth? To me, it is a coming out story on a larger level. In today's understanding of Unitarian Universalism, these words are translated into, instead of focusing on the Trinity so much, we focus on the oneness of all people. And you should know that there is a push right now to have this mean the oneness with all sentient beings. We are always pushing what we believe is inclusiveness. On the Universalist side, because a large number of Unitarian Universalists, and I'm assuming many of you in this room, don't believe in God, it has moved on to believing that all people are loved, that we need to keep pushing towards full inclusion of all people, and that doing this work requires all of us. It requires me, it requires you. It starts with every single person in our faith movement going beyond the basics of saying, we like you and of course we're accepting, to being willing to take public stands when it's scary and unpopular and you might get mud thrown on you. It is really, really scary to be out. I'm not going to lie. When I began the process of looking at congregations with interim minister positions, one of the things I cared very much about was their welcoming congregation status. One of the things that made me be interested in serving as the interim minister here at South Valley is also something that I've heard visitors say draws them as well, the huge rainbow flag on the front of the building. Never underestimate the power of a rainbow flag. While it may be a little faded, the message it sends to all who drive by is that all, and in particular GLBTQ people, are welcome here. As a lesbian who has lived in conservative states, who has worked in employment situations that were unwelcoming and even threatening, I know what it is to not be sure about things like personal safety and community safety. When thinking about moving here, it also helped that the Supreme Court declared in their Obergefell decision in 2015 that all states had to offer same-sex marriage and to recognize marriages performed in other states. If that decision didn't exist, I might still be living in New York, or I might have chosen to go to another state that legally recognized my marriage. It is upsetting that these are things that queer folks have to think about, but it is reality still in 2010. I am very, very grateful for the immense progress that I have seen in my lifetime. And yet I know that hate crimes still happen, even in liberal cities. There is nowhere that is immune from hate and violence. The Supreme Court heard a case last week that could strip employment protections from GLBTQ people, and it could allow employers to enforce gender roles as they understand it. What I and others in the liberal religious world refer to as progress Many others clearly don't see the same way. They want stasis or regression. There are still politicians who are trying to remove the protections we have now. Liberal religionists like us have to stay alert, aware, informed, and ready to be responsive when necessary. This is no time for a casual faith. While this service will count towards the renewal status for the congregation, for the welcoming congregations, there are additional required programs we have to do. I have a dream of this happening here because especially for this interim time period, this will give South Valley something to be additionally proud of and point to as a sign that this congregation is actively involved in the work of self-reflection, awareness, and growth. If you are interested in doing this work, please come talk to me. I am not 100% attached to it, it's just an idea I'm floating out there. What do you think? What will it mean for this congregation to continue to take public stands? I know you have done so in the past, but I also want to acknowledge that it's hard, it's challenging to do. I noticed that some of you have the pronoun stickers on your name tags, but not all of you. I wonder about that, just trying to stay in a place of curiosity. When I started here in August, the bathroom sign by the front door, that it said family bathroom, and it reinforced what a family looks like with the image that was there. And so I asked that it be removed to make it not heteronormative and more gender inclusive. I know that that is your value. I just think someone probably didn't notice that. I think that that's just a benefit of being an outsider who can see things from a different viewpoint. I'm also wondering, where is your welcoming congregation sign? It's not only not visible, but apparently no one knows where it is. And I've looked through the building. Some of you who are on the community listserv probably saw the question. I'm wondering where did the sign go? It's just a curiosity. It's not a shame or anything. Just, I wonder what happened to that sign. I'm just trying to stay, observe, notice. And I encourage you to stay in curiosity as well. I realize that this congregation has done major work in the past, and that you have done important things that you should be proud of, absolutely. I am not diminishing the importance all of you have done. I wasn't here when the rainbow flag went up, but I'm assuming that there might have been some pushback. But it went up, and stays up anyway. That this congregation knows this is my place. You should be very proud of the work that you have done, and yet the work is never truly done. A recent report by Trust, an organization of transgender religious professionals in the EU world, found that many congregations are not as accepting as they think they are, and some actively cause harm. We always think we have done enough, but we have not. I'm going to tell you a little story. I don't know if you know this concept that's called internalized homophobia. We all have it. I remember years after I initially came out that I learned of a colleague who is a lesbian, and my very first, thankfully internal, I didn't say this out loud, reaction was, I thought better of her than that. As soon as I had that thought, I was horrified. How could I, who went through years of figuring out who I am, and then being willing to lose my family and the faith of my childhood, how could I still think something like that? Well, I live in this culture. I breathe this air, just like everyone else. I do not get a free pass because I'm a lesbian. In fact, when it comes to transphobia, many of the folks who are very anti-trans are gay, lesbian, or bisexual themselves. We queer people are not superhuman who love unconditionally by virtue of our sexual orientation. It is not enough to say we are accepting. Action is always required. If we truly believe in universalism, that all people are loved, that we have to practice radical preemptive inclusion, then the work is actually never done. Our principles are ideals we are always striving towards. We are never, ever fully there. We do not now or ever rest on our laurels. As I said, even having this service, writing this sermon, and now delivering it, I'm feeling a little nervous. No matter how many years I've been out, there are always questions of, will I be accepted for who I am? How will you treat me after you have heard my story? On the same level, Unitarian Universalism is on the precipice of its work toward dismantling white supremacy, knowing that there will be losses. There have been losses because of being willing to stand up for what is right. For me, it comes down to this. I cannot call myself a Universalist, and of those two words, Unitarian Universalist, Universalist is the one I'm more attached to. I cannot call myself a Universalist if I am not willing to get in the trenches and get mud thrown on me. Our faith calls us to more than lip service. We absolutely must do more, and we must be more. Especially in the political climate we are living in right now. People need a religious community that is willing to be there for them, allow them to be refugees from wherever they came from, and help them to move into their full, authentic selves. Never underestimate what it means to be yourself. This congregation is known for doing that, but we must never stop, ever. My hope is that this congregation is able to be proud of its work and know that it takes ongoing efforts to be out, the way that Michael shared in his letter, the letter to Mama, which I always love. It takes tremendous courage to be able to sing Born This Way, loud and proud. It truly does. Just like coming out is not a one and done event in our lives, the work of being welcoming is never fully complete either. I believe in you, and I know you have what it takes to keep living your values out and proud in the larger Salt Lake City area. As our service comes to a close, I'm going to pull back the curtain a little bit so you can kind of see what goes into making the service happen. I want to tell you a little bit about a change to the end of the service we're going to do. In a minute, we are going to have our closing song, which the choir, when I say let's do this closing song, the choir is all going to come up to the front. They're going to come up and they're going to sing with you. And then Peter is going to come up here and lead you in extinguishing the chalice. I am going to give the benediction, but I'm giving the benediction from the floor. Once I do that, then the choir is going to do a reprise of Born This Way, and I'm going to encourage all of you to sing out with this song. I know you know it. I saw your faces, right? You know this song. So when the choir starts to sing, Peter and I are going to walk down this aisle and then greet people as they leave or go down to the potluck. It's important to me that this service, especially today, ends on a very joyful note. We're leaving with an uplifting note of standing in who we are, believing it with all of our hearts, and choosing to be more inclusive in all that we do. May we live from the knowing that coming out is never done as individuals or as a congregation or as a faith movement. Stands must be taken. We cannot be casual about our faith. May it be so. Please join me in singing number 368, Now Let Us Sing.
Thank you. saying our chalice, extinguishing words in order of service. We extinguish this chalice, but not the warmth of community, the light of truth, or the unity of action. We hold each other in our hearts until we meet again.
Hold on. Just want to do the benediction. As we go forth into our week together, into community, and our ongoing love in our life, please know that we are one, and we are all loved. Amen.